I'm Tom Del Vaccaro, and welcome to Politics in Perspective. This is a special edition for America's 250th birthday. I'm going to have some of my friends come along that you've seen over the last year and a half come on the episode and give their thoughts about America. But first, I want to talk about why I love America and what is so incredible and why America is so exceptional. So we'll start off with what my first bit about my opening statement, and then we will go to them. So let's get right to it. There are two aspects of America I want to discuss, and they come out of and are themes in my book, The Lessons of the American Civilization. The first of which is that civilizations are born in faith and they die in doubt. But what do I mean by faith? Well, there is a strong religious component to it. They are born, come together with a common belief religiously and a purpose. So here's the quote that is derived from my book. They are born in faith, a faith in God and a faith in the civilization's purpose. The belief in a God is simple when it comes to the United States. America was in significant part started to be a place where people had religious freedom. Freedom, which they didn't have in England because you either did what the King of England said or risked your very life. So they came to America and established colonies that were based, their charters, often based deeply with a religious purpose, excuse me, and that was a common purpose throughout the United States. Keep in mind that the first aspects of education in America were based, of course, on the Bible. That is, we lived on personal farms, meaning family owned farms, even in the South, where slavery became an aspect, but it was a farm based economy. We didn't have a commercial society. Education was in the home. And the first book that from which the parents read were, of course, the Bible. So there, you had this thread, this common faith, this belief in God, this purpose to be good people as Christ requested almost of us, right? More than requested. His call, your calling was that in America. There's no question about that, even though our current educational system denies it. There were the Bible Belt colonies in the charters. Or once the schools started to emerge, they were religiously based. Even the great universities in Harvard and the like were religiously based. But that's not the only faith I'm discussing. The other faith is in a purpose for the civilization. America had a purpose. The people who came here wanted to live a life of freedom in addition to a religious life. And the purpose related to how they interacted with each other over time. Keep in mind that America stood in great contrast to the rest of history. America would eventually become a civilization believing that we were endowed as individuals with inalienable rights, that God invested those in us. America was started during the age of absolutism, meaning that they had the divine right of kings is what ruled almost all of the globe, saying these kings saying that God said that I should lead. But in America, it turned everything on its head. America said that God invested those rights in us. And so the purpose of the American civilization was this life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the democratization of the economic and political opportunity. What do I mean by that? There were no lords that came to America, no feudal aspect. The king initially, but once America revolted, Americans owned to a great degree their own economic future. And there was an amazingly level playing field, with the exception of indentured servitude and slavery, which existed. I talk about it in my book. But more than any other place in history by far, America was a land of opportunity and a land of the ability to be involved in politics. When America was started, they had kings. You didn't have the ability to just be involved in politics. You didn't get to run for office and become king. But in America, you could, in time, run for office and become president. There are no Lincolns during the age of absolutism and kings and queens. So America's purpose as a civilization, the entire purpose, was based in faith and this democratization of opportunity, both economic and political. And that turned history on its head. Again, think about this. Never before in history did someone show up to a piece of land and say, okay, instead of one person being in charge, we are going to be a civilization that brings in people to participate. It wasn't perfect when it started. My friend George Landreth will talk about that in a bit. But it kept evolving, and more people became involved. America today allows for more people to be involved in economics and politics than any place on the globe. It's not even close. A single person with a single idea can race to the top of the riches, unlike any other place. America is where innovation occurs, not Europe. Europe has a different history. Ours, our very purpose, was opportunity for all, not outcomes for all, but opportunity for everyone. And in that is this special notion with the next slide about capitalism. People, the left calls, and many people call capitalism a system. It's actually false. It's not a system. There is no center of capitalism. You can't go Google who is running capitalism, what's the address? You can do that for Washington, D.C. You can do that for Sacramento in California or Albany in New York. But capitalism is actually the absence of a government-imposed system. That would be pure capitalism. It did exist in some places. If you look at the very start of Singapore, there was almost no government involvement whatsoever. But capitalism is voluntary action. Why this is important is because America did something with it which others did not. For most of history, there was poverty. For most of history, the politician, the king or queen or dictator, owned the economy, owned it, and all the political power. You were a serf. You worked on their land, and you were bound to it for generations of generations and lived on the edge of poverty. Capitalism sprung out on the edges not because it all came together at once, but it came together over time, just in fits and starts. So if someone had created a little more shoes than they needed, or more apples than they had to give away, capitalism began on the margins where you would trade with others. They would have shoes, you would have apples. What capitalism did was create a different wealth than land. Real property, property that was real, was the land. Capitalism started this process of goods and services where somebody other than the feudal lords or the king could gather wealth. And when those occurred in great amounts, meaning that away from the center of power, you had economic power and all this activity, and those in charge were separated of the government. That's where freedom resides. Capitalism's greatest gift in history was that it created freedom because you had economic power on one side of the scale and political power on another. And the threat to the American Republic is when these two come back together in the form of big business doing business with big government, and the votes of you and I don't matter as much. And nowhere in the world has this gift of capitalism produced more freedom than in the United States, a greater standard of living than in the United States, and a greater participation not only in economics, but in political power, because those with economic power then gain political power over time and have a greater right of self-determination. So what makes America exceptional is that instead of saying the kings have the rights, America was radical and said, no, it was the everyday person that God invested those rights. And we handed a few jobs for government to do in the form of enumerated powers. And we had a capitalist system that let us be in charge of our own economy and kept government and the economy somewhat separate over time. That produced riches and a balance of power that sustained freedom. And for me, those are the two aspects that make America so great. Thanks for listening in on that. And we'll be right back with a series of my friends who will tell you why they love the United States, its founding, and the Constitution so very much. I'm Tom Del Beccaro, and welcome to Politics in Perspective. Welcome back, everyone, to Politics in Perspective. As you can see, joining me is my great friend, Bobby Gunther Wall. He's had a radio show in the Lehigh Valley in the wonderful state of Pennsylvania on WAB for, I think, almost 4 decades. Maybe he'll correct me on that. But I love it because he's in the center of real America, as I like to refer to it. And you can catch him every morning on WAB. Bobby, how you doing?
Good. 42 years. 42 years.
Wow.
In my 43rd year now. 42 years complete. One station, one show.
And I think where you live is one of the most down-to-earth places in America, and still, you know, a place not completely out in the countryside, but still very down to earth. So let's have at it. I'm having a series of guests come on. You're the first that is going to tell us what you love about the American experience on this 250th anniversary.
Well, I love that it was the first No Kings Day. It was actually the original. It was the
There you
original
go.
No King's Day. I love that all the people that hate our Second Amendment don't realize that they won the right to their freedom and to hate this country by men with guns. I love that about America. I do love a lot about America currently, but what I was thinking about this, and I thought, really, they talk about the great experiment and the amazing Constitution they left us. Think about the courage it took to do what they did. I am so thankful for the founding fathers. I mean, they went up against the British Empire, the biggest empire in history to that point, the military might, outmanned, outgunned, outtrained, we know the outcome. They didn't, and they
Yeah,
still
what a great point. Say that again.
we know the outcome. They didn't. I mean, the shot heard around the world. Those guys had no idea what was going to happen. We go, oh yeah, we won. Yeah, talk to Valley Forge is in Pennsylvania, the Liberty Bell, and of course they signed where they wrote the Declaration of Independence, where they signed the Declaration, or part of it was signed all over the place. But you know what I mean. The point I'm making. Bottom line is, this is the birthplace of liberty, and we had no idea of the outcome, and they still did it. What incredible courage to take on the might of the British Empire, not knowing the outcome. But if you ask me other things I love about America, I love that. Oh, Josh Shapiro could not put us in the the Great American Fair. He pulled us out, and then after he got pushback, he blamed the Department of
In-
Department of Commerce.
Interior.
Yeah, Department of Commerce, because they couldn't find a sponsor. So America's birthplace is Pennsylvania, and this is the 250th anniversary, and your own Commerce Department can't find a sponsor. Then close the Department of Commerce because you're useless. That I also love, though, that
But
Pennsylvania set
real quick, Josh Shapiro is the governor
of
who is a
Pennsylvania.
Democrat of Pennsylvania. But go
Yeah.
on.
Yes, and he thinks he's going to be president, but he never will be. But then, thanks again, we had the freedom to step forward, and John Fetterman, Democrat, senator of Pennsylvania, and Dave McCormick, Republican, stepped forward, got business together, the same ones that Shapiro and the Department of Commerce couldn't find, and we were at the American Fair. So thank you. I love that. I love our freedom to own guns. I love our freedom to worship, our freedom of expression.
Well,
You
stop
talked
right
about.
there, because nowhere else on the globe could you exist to the degree that you exist. For 40 years, you've been giving your opinion
Yeah.
without fear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And honestly, that's true. I mean, from some of the opinions, I'd have probably been dead about 2 days in Iran. God only in China, I'd be in a labor camp. Russia, I'd be, with Alexander Solzhenitsyn, toes up, but first have been in a labor camp. Yeah. So yeah, the ability to express what we want. I love, I love watching. When you ask me what I love about America, all I need to do is get a tape and replay all the visitors to the World Cup. And that's what I love about America, what they love about America, the expanse of it, the different geographies, the beauty of the people, the abundance that we have here that we take so for granted. I mean, it's amazing that people who came here legally to watch the World Cup, or people that migrate here legally, like Janice Trey, who spoke last night at the Lehigh Valley MAGA party. She was in forced labor as like a 4-year-old in China. You talk about, those people who come here and love this country, and yet then you got the people that come here illegally. They wave their country's flags, spit on our country, take our benefits, and they're allowed to do it. No other country would you get away with that.
Yeah,
But
you
I
do.
love.
We got to wrap it up real quick.
Well, I just love that you just watch what the World Cup people are saying, and and that's what I love about America, and that's what I love about our founding and our Constitution.
All right, Bobby, thanks so much for joining me on Politics and Perspective. I'll be back on
Happy
your show
Independence
soon.
Day.
All right, see you soon. Welcome back, everyone, to Politics and Perspective. I'm particularly pleased that a good friend of mine, Phil Bell, is joining us from one of the great places in America. That would be the Smithsonian. So, Phil, you've been involved in politics a long time. You've been in and out of DC, and yet you still have this optimism. So, if you would Tell us what you love about the American experience.
Well, Tom, first of all, thanks for having me on. And it's always a pleasure to be with you. What I love the most about the American experience is the opportunity that we have. That's the thing. There are so many people who have lived in the course of world history, and they have never had the opportunities that we have here in the United States. And so it always breaks my heart when I see people who say they want to throw it away, they want it to be taken away. No, I love that opportunity, and I want everyone to embrace it and run with it.
Yeah, so and you've traveled the United States, been to countless states, and see people from all backgrounds. So how does that
Yeah.
factor into what you're saying?
Well, it's that's another one of the great things about the country. Think about in the short amount of time that our country has been around and all of the people who have assimilated into our culture and created something that is so great. It's a culture that's bold, it's a culture that's outgoing, it's a culture that wants to thrive. We have all of these things, and it came, yes, from people from all different places, but built around that law with, background in Rome and background in England and all of that neat stuff. So yes, that's something that makes us so special.
And finally, tell us why you're so optimistic about America going forward.
Well, think about this. I love the story of the welder who he became a millionaire or almost a millionaire thanks to Elon Musk. Now, this is somebody, he said, I'm getting a welding job. He had a great skill. He's utilizing that skill. And they said, here's some stock. Now, most people would say, that's not a big deal. Let me just do my job. Well, the company went public about a month ago. And what happened? Now this guy and over 4,000 other people have become millionaires as a result. And we're not talking about people who were born with a silver spoon. We're talking about people who worked hard and decide and were able to achieve. And as long as that's possible, I'm optimistic about this country.
Yeah, just think about it. Here's a guy who just went to trade school and now and he worked hard. He just traded his wares for something else voluntarily. He wasn't chosen particularly by government. He wasn't subsidized. And
Yeah.
that's a great thing about America. Pursue your dreams.
And he didn't ask the government to give it to him. That's the most important thing. So when I hear people that come out and say, oh, I want you to pay for my health care, I want you to pay for my college, I want you to pay for this and that. No, go out, do it yourself, do it the way you like, and make it great. That's our country great.
All right, Phil, thanks so much for joining us. We'll have you on for an extended segment in the near future. Happy 4th to you.
Well, thank you, Tom. I look forward to it, and it's always a pleasure being on with you.
All right, boss. See you soon. Welcome back to Politics in Perspective again. You've seen a lot of optimism out of my first couple of casts, but nobody, I think, is more of an optimistic warrior than my producer, Annie Cyrus, who's been producing my show from day one, but she's just not anyone. This is a woman from Iran, forced child bride, jailed for religious purposes, meaning she wasn't Islamic, and was jailed and smuggled out and came to America to pursue a life of freedom. So Annie, what do you love? I can guess, I know, but tell everybody what you love about the American experience.
Well, thank you, Tom. Yes, I sometimes feel like I can have both perspective. I can look at it as an American, or I can look at it as someone who pursued the dream of America. Because there's a difference. There's the American dream, and then there are millions out there who are just chasing after the dream they know as America. When I came to America, I was given a promise, a single promise, and that was freedom. And I didn't understand it until I studied the history of America. And when I realized ordinary man had the courage to say, without a guarantee, we're willing to sacrifice our lives for liberty, that's when I realized what a beautiful concept to be an American. How proud I am to say I learned from their courage and bravery, that I do everything in my power to not just practice those freedoms that they proved come to me from God and not kings or presidents or even governments, but I can also be part of the remaining parts for the next generation to look back and say, when our moment came, we had the courage and bravery to say, we are not bowing, we are not giving up, we're going to fight as hard as they did to continue this very idea known as America.
So Annie, you came from a place where you literally lived every moment looking over your shoulder in fear. You did things, you were brave, but you looked over your shoulder at every minute. Could you explain the difference you have here? Because Americans don't have that.
Oh, no, yes. Where I come from, and it still exists. Because there's an argument, you know, the kingdom that Americans fought isn't there anymore. Okay, but where I come from, it still exists. To this day, in Iran, if you do one wrong move, if you go against your government in the slightest way, you can most certainly go ahead and write down your will, because they will kill you. Since I came to America, I had to adjust my brain, Tom, that I don't have to worry about my execution. I can be me as long as I follow the law, the concept that comes from human rights. I be fine. Nobody can hang me for doing anything. That's just my basic rights.
Yeah, so the dissent, the right to say to your leaders you are wrong, is the very foundation, all right? As I call it in my book, The Lessons of the American Civilization, dissent is the mother of democracy. Once you have that right, then you can begin to live in freedom. Please run with that and tell us the difference between there and here.
That is 100% correct. And if you would allow me, I will encourage all of your audience, anybody watching this moment, please, if you haven't read Tom's book, read it. And I don't say that based on one of my love of American experiences, meeting you, getting to know you, working with you, but learning so much from you. You taught me a lot of what I am proud of being American today. Pick up a copy of both his books, but you're correct. That's a huge part of it. But let's take it a step further, Tom. Let's look at it this way. To be allowed to have the thought of criticizing my government. I have that in America. I can sit in my living room, take a pen and a paper, and write down what I'm disappointed about in my government. If I do that in Iran and that paper is found, I'm again killed for just having the audacity to think they did wrong is enough for my punishment. Forget about social media and shows and podcasts and anything else. You can't even think about criticizing them. Why? Because they are superior to you, because they represent their God. You're just a slave to follow their translation of God's given rights, not your own.
Yeah, that's amazing. You folks, Annie's got an amazing book out called Architect of Jihad. It's on my nightstand. I read bits and pieces of it every couple of days because it's a lot to absorb. But if we don't absorb it and understand it, then we're going to give away the very freedom that she describes. So Annie, always great to have your thoughts. I appreciate your kind words, and we'll be right back with more of Politics in Perspective. Welcome back, everyone, to Politics in Perspective. We're doing these vignettes with friends of the show and friends in my life, and certainly George Landreth qualifies for that, the principal behind Frontiers of Freedom. He wrote a great piece recently on what he thinks is exceptional about America, or one aspect of it. So, George, welcome to the show. Please tell America the incredibly important message that you recently wrote about.
Well, absolutely, Tom. It's an honor to be here with you today. And of course, it's an honor to celebrate the principles of our founding, because they were amazing. Because in 1776, America was basically 13 insignificant colonies. We weren't wealthy, dominant, or anything like that. And if you were to look on a piece of paper, everything would tell you, if you're measuring power, that there was no way the American cause could have succeeded. And yet it did. And that's because it was born on an extraordinary idea, because it announced to the world that human rights, for example, don't come from kings or parliaments or government. They come from God. And governments don't create these rights, but they are instituted for the very purpose of securing the rights that God gave us. And I think that was a very revolutionary concept back in 1776. And it was, I think it's still somewhat revolutionary in the world today. Thomas Jefferson.
If I stop you real quick there, John Adams said the American Revolution was in the mind, not the battlefield. And that's exactly what you're describing.
Right. Well, and like Thomas Jefferson wrote, we hold these truths to be self-evident. In other words, they're so obvious truths that you don't have to debate them because they're just obvious. It's kind of like saying, is noon brighter than midnight? You don't have to argue about that. It's self-evidently true. And he was saying this is the self-evident truth, that all men are created equal, but they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And I think those words changed human history. And so we didn't become the greatest nation on earth because of geography or natural resources or anything like that. Because you look around the world, there's all kinds of large nations with lots of, good geography or lots of natural resources and large populations. We rose because our nation was built upon the principle of unleashed human potential. And that human potential was unleashed by individual liberty, equity before God and before the law, private property rights, free enterprise, religious freedom, freedom of speech, the rule of law, and constitutionally limited government, which made that government could not dominate your life. And I think those principles transformed 13 vulnerable colonies into the world's economic, military, technological, innovative, and cultural superpower.
And you also in the piece say something that's very important, because critics that arise today say, oh, well, America wasn't. But our founders didn't say that they created the perfect marble structure. To the contrary, they allowed for our improvement over time. Speak to me about that, or speak to the listeners about that.
Well, I think that's a very good point. I mean, as awesome as the Constitution and the Declaration were, the reality is the genius of the American system is not that it made mistakes impossible. It's that it created mechanisms that allowed us to correct those problems and those mistakes. And so, we, for example, the Declaration of Independence condemned slavery in its very first draft, and yet the nation didn't live up to that at that time. But the Constitution provided a framework through which Americans could abolish slavery, secure civil rights, expand suffrage. And I don't mean suffering, I mean voting suffrage in that sense. Religious liberties, particularly for non-majority religions and things like that. And so I think our founding principles are that our founders understood that we would have to have a system that would work to correct mistakes as we discovered them. And yes, they did.
Yeah, no question about it. But they understood the human experience. And what the amazing thing about us, America, is we've had great people and leaders continue to pursue that excellence. And so, George, I appreciate you coming on. Tell people where they can find you.
Well, you can find me at ff.org. You can also find me at on Twitter or X at G Landrith. That's GLANDRITH.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us. Happy 4th to you.
And to you and your viewers and listeners. It's a great time to be celebrating being American.
Welcome back, everyone, to Politics in Perspective. I'm thrilled to have one of America's most important and greatest historians, the one and only Craig Shirley, the Reagan biographer. Um, okay, you're living in a home that was built in 1730. That has meaning for us today.
Yes.
What you you've been involved, read history for so long. You're for so long. It
Yeah.
lives in you. So what stands out to you about the American experience?
You know, Tom, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'm trying to articulate it. What really stands out to me is that this is the victory. This is the victory of Americanism, the victory of American exceptionalism. Is that, you know, for 250 years we've confronted royal dictates and slavery and the Huns and the Nazis and the Empire of Japan and communism, and we've met every challenge and won, because the American creed is something quite special. And here we sit, the 250th anniversary, we sit astride the world. We are the envy of the world. We're we set the tone for the world. The rest of the world, we're seeing it now. We're seeing it literally right now with the soccer crowds that are coming here, the Scottish crowds and the French and they're loving America. They're loving America. They're loving our consumerism. They're loving our freedom. They're loving our hospitality. You know, they're proving it, even as the left and a New York commie mayor. You know, those are real losers of, you know, you can't have winners without losers, right? Not everybody can be a winner. Well, you're a winner. I'm a winner. Is that everybody we know we associate with are winners, because they, you know, that's the beauty of America. It allows us to rise to our highest level of achievement without the heavy hand of nobility or government interfering with our upward mobility. In America, you can reinvent yourself. Look at, you know, Reagan. How many times he reinvented himself from being, you know, college and then a radio broadcaster to a Hollywood actor to a after dinner speaker to a governor to a presidential candidate to a president to one of our greatest presidents. He had, you know, F. Scott Fitzgerald was wrong. He said, you know, there's only one act in American life. That's not true. It's that all of us, many of us, have gone through the reintroduction of ourselves and a reinvention of ourselves, and that's the beauty of America. You know, if we lived in a British society, you know, we'd live in a caste system, we couldn't get, or we live in India, God forbid, we couldn't get out of that social designation. It matters how we tried, we couldn't get out of that social you know, assignment. Is that we couldn't better ourselves. But here in this country, you know, you can rise to, I mean look at the Thomas Edison and the Wright brothers and how many people came from poverty and Henry Ford, and how many people came from nothing and built themselves up and built themselves into successful men and successful women, you know, successful writers, successful politicians, successful inventors, successful astronauts. It really is remarkable. In the long history of the world, this country stands as truly one of the great, and I believe divinely inspired.
Yeah, and don't limit it to industry. Look, I know you're not, but think of Lincoln and his
Yes.
humble beginnings, and he changed
Yes.
world history.
And it becomes president of the United States. And he was born in a one room log cabin with dirt floor. Read the law, taught himself how to read. Is that, you know, he had to fire him out. And he worked on you know, the river. He was sculling on the rivers, pushing around barges, and he goes on to become president of the United States. But that upward mobility I mean, that's the perfect example. That's the perfect example of how, and by the way, you don't have to rise if you don't want to. Nobody's forcing you to. It's only through your own will and desire can you improve yourself. Is that you're free. The point is you are free. You can choose to improve yourself, or you can choose to stay mediocre. You know, or even worse. You know, that's what Mandami. I saw him complaining this morning at a press conference about America, and he doesn't understand America. He's so colored by his hatred of American exceptionalism. Is that and all he's doing is marginalizing himself because the vast majority of Americans believe as you and I do, not believe as Mandami. So all he's doing is marginalizing himself, and by extension, marginalizing his party.
So, Craig, that's all the time we have for. But folks, Craig Shirley, Shirley, buy his books if you want to. That optimism which he speaks about, which defined America, which brought us through our darkest hours and created our greatest shining cities on the hills, are contained in his books. We'll be right back with more Politics in Perspective.
Thank you, Tom.
Welcome back to Politics in Perspective. Thrilled to have the one and only Stacy Washington on. You can hear her on Sirius Radio 9 to 12. You should be listening to her because not only is she one of America's better thinkers, but she speaks so very clearly. So, Stacy, thanks so much for coming on. Tell us, you get to talk a lot to the world, but tell us in a few moments what makes the American experience exceptional to you.
Well, I've grown up in Germany and I've traveled all over the world. I've been to Russia back when it was the USSR, England, and of course, all of the European nations. But I've also been to Saudi Arabia when I was on active duty in the Air Force. And I've been to the Netherlands, and I feel like, Switzerland, there's been so many places that I've been to, and they're all gorgeous places. Our planet is just full of beautiful, fantastic countries. The people are amazing. They're different, though. They're not Americans. That's a distinction we have to make every single time we talk about America, is how different Americans are. And it's become like this joke where people will say, "Oh, I can spot an American anywhere." Yeah, because the American is the only one who's smiling. The American is the only one who's talking to strangers. The American is the only one who is like blown away by the Duomo and is, taking pictures of it from every angle. Everyone else is kind of bored with it, or they're catching a selfie, but it's very, pinky up and kind of proud, where Americans are just reacting to things and we're very visceral. But it's because we have a freedom and a liberty that runs through our veins so hotly that it makes us so different from everyone else. And it has been so gratifying this past few weeks to see the World Cup visitors expressing the truth about America and talking so eloquently about what I've known since I was a kid. I'll never forget going to the grocery store. We shopped on base. So everything in Germany closes at 6:00. And on Wednesdays back then, it closed one late night a week, 8:30. And so if we needed to buy anything off base, you would go on Wednesday night because that was a late night, or you had to go during the day on Saturday. And so we would just accept that because that was what it was. So we're in the States for the summer, and I'm like 8 or 9 years old, and I'm usually in bed, but this night I'm up late and my aunt is going to the grocery store. And I'm like, "Can I please go?" And my mom's like, "You're supposed to be in bed." And my aunt's like, "Come on." So I go with her and we go to Kroger. And I was just blown away because I'm used to shopping at the commissary where everything is like the shelves are low. It's like a warehouse. This place is brightly lit and the food is up to the ceiling. And it's packed. It's like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and it's packed. And I was asking my aunt all these questions, and she's like, "Where do you guys shop in Germany?" I was like, "We shop on base at the commissary, and it closes at like 7 o'clock every night." She was like, "Oh." I was like, "What is this place?" She said, "Oh, it's the grocery store, and there's just like dozens of these places all over." And I was like, "And they're open at night?" And so she, on the way home, she was like, "That's open. There's the Walmart. That's open. That's open." I was just like, I was blown away. And then I had the similar experience moving into this house about 12 years ago. I have some leftover pool loungers from the previous owner, and I'm determined to rehabilitate them. I'm going to spray paint them, but they're missing screws, and that's why she left them behind, because they were essentially trash. So I take the screws and I go to Lowe's and I find this little old guy who works there, and he's on the fastener aisle. That's what it's called. And he says to me, he says, "What are you looking for?" And I said, "I have these three screws, and I have no idea how you're going to match them." And he said, "Oh, we have a screw finder. Come." So he shows me the screw finder. We find the size. He says, "We have metric, and we have," he says, "we have anywhere from 300,000 to 800,000 screws at any given moment in this store." They're called fasteners, actually. And this is the fastener aisle. And I was like, "What?" He said, "Yeah. And don't even get me started on the up stock." I was like, "Up stock?" He said, "Yeah, the stock that's up top. We call that up stock. We use our the lifter thing to go up there and pull pallets down from up stock and put them, restock the lower shelves when people come in and buy, large orders." And I connected that awe. I've talked about it on the radio for ever since then. For 10 years, I've been talking about the fastener aisle at Lowe's as an example of what America is, a place of abundance. You have this Asian guy who's got a viral video. Last week, he went viral for saying that people here are building whole houses on the weekend, and in his province in Japan, he can't buy any equipment at all. If he needs to make something, he buys it or he orders it from a company, and they come and they bring everything and they make it for him at his house. And really, there isn't a lot of that. There's no home improvement. If something goes wrong with something, people get in trouble, because in Japan, it's highly frowned upon to have things break. And then they come and they fix it for you. They bring the drill, they bring the screws, they fix it for you. You don't keep, like, I have screws in every drawer in this house. We have drills. There's even a drill that's kind of like my drill here. My daughter has a drill. She has an apartment. We gave her her own little kit. It has a drill in it. Everybody has a hot glue gun. Like, everything around here is being done by one of us at this house. Everything from knocking down cinder block walls that are 12 feet tall. We did that. We filled 3 dumpsters with cinder block that we knocked down. My husband and the kids and I, we just decided the wall was too tall. It was blocking our view. So we took it down and disposed of it. The people came and picked up the dumpsters, and they were laughing because they were like, "You were just 500 pounds from being too much for us to pick this up. We're going to have to send a commercial one." He said, "I'm going to let you go ahead and do it," and took the dumpsters away. So this is an amazing place. And if you don't get out of this place to go find that out, that's on you. But you have to love a country that was based on liberty. It was based on freedom. Don't believe the lie that we somehow came here. It was all slavery and all oppression and all killing the Indians. A whole lot of stuff went down, I'll admit it, but it was all for our benefit, because here we are. I'm sitting here in the ice cold AC, which there's a heat wave across the country, and my AC wasn't cold enough yesterday. So I got to complaining, and my husband called a guy who came first thing this morning. He came so fast, I didn't even have a chance to register that my husband had acknowledged he was going to bring someone out. He's now here fixing all of our units, and it's cold in here again, that's the American way. I need to feel like I need a blanket in here because it's 90 something outside. And that's just the surface stuff. Having air conditioning so you don't die from heat exhaustion is important. But what's more important is living in a country where I, as a woman, as a Black woman at that, can go anywhere. I can walk around. I can fly across the country. I can take an Uber. I can stay in a hotel. I can jog at 6 a.m. I can do anything I'd like to do anywhere in this country. And everybody is just kind of like, "Oh, there's another person." And most of the time they're just smiling and saying hi, because, that's how we are here in America. We say hi a lot, and we love to talk to strangers. And so the people, that's the best thing about this place. But the natural resources, the beauty of each state, 50 different countries in one country, the amazing amount of work ethic here. We are the nation that works the most days per year outside of the Chinese, but the Chinese are wage slaves. They're owned by the Communist Party of China. They're not citizens. We are citizens, and we choose to work hard. We choose not to take the month of August off. We choose to provide the defense for all of the Western nations in this world. we choose to have the best technology. We choose to be the home of Elon Musk. He wouldn't have put his companies here if it wasn't such a the best, the very best country. That's why he chose this country to be his new home for all of these amazing advancements, the home of and created place of AI and every other good thing.
You know, Stacey, thanks for living up to my billing on you as such a clear thinker and a clear expression. But you're right. The American spirit. That's what you're talking about, the American spirit. And that's what points forward for us as well. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day. Happy 4th to you
Thank
and
you,
your
Tom.
family. All right, and we'll talk to you
happy
soon.
4th to you and that adorable baby of yours. That baby
Thank
is
you.
TV worthy. You should know. You should know.
All right, talk to you soon. And we'll be right back with more of Politics in Perspective. Welcome back, everybody, to Politics in Perspective. Again, another great friend of mine, the one and only Brigadier General retired Blaine Holt, and host of Dangerous Intellectuals, is here to tell us what he loves about America, and he's a thinker. So I've been waiting to hear this. So, General, how about it?
In northern Idaho right now, and I'm reminded that this is the United States of America. It's also God's creation. And we are a nation founded under God, albeit founded in a tavern with a rabble-rouser named Sam Adams. And as Sam gets tavern after tavern on his side with the Sons of Liberty, eventually the elites of the day start to take notice. Guys like Jay, Payne, Madison, Patrick Henry, Revere, Washington himself. And they came and coalesced through that war around America, not as an ethnicity or a religion, albeit founded as a Christian nation. America came together as an idea, and it's still an idea. And that's what makes us different from any other empire that's ever existed. And it may be our last hope to keep this empire going as we see the winds of control and enslavement start to bear down on us again with the globalists and technology and all these other wars around the world and adversaries that would have designs on us. But America still comes through as an idea. And I firmly believe if it wasn't for all our warts and blemishes, all the terrible things that have happened on our watch, I absolutely believe that mankind would be in a far darker place today if it wasn't for the shiny city on a hill. The one that Washington envisaged not as a king and a monarch with his family members to rule after, but as a president, as an elected sovereign of our nation who warned us not to take on foreign entanglements. Jefferson, Hamilton, and then on into great leaders along our way, guys like Lincoln and JFK. And so I'm reminded as I'm looking out across the mountains of northern Idaho right now, that we are in fact a beautiful, God-blessed nation. And if
Well, Blaine was enjoying his freedom in the mountains so much we lost him, but we appreciate him and all of the guests. And this is normally the political roundup session, but let's just take a moment about what Stacey was saying before, talking about the American spirit. So people are worried what lies ahead for America. Well, there's a couple of quotes that I want to end this special on, and it relates to one by the great historian Toynbee, who talked about people worried about whether a civilization was in decline or not. And he basically said it wasn't programmatic because civilizations are comprised of the wills of men. And that means it's on us, which brings us, of course, to Benjamin Franklin. When asked what type of government we had, he said a republic if you can keep it. Now, I've capitalized the word you there because he didn't say if our leaders could keep it. Benjamin Franklin was wise enough to know that leaders wouldn't keep freedom, wouldn't keep a republic because they in general would become too selfish over time. He said, if you can keep it, and that places it on us. So if civilization is a product of wills and a republic can stand if we keep it, what makes America great is what started it and where I started this whole discussion. Because we were invested with these powers. We enumerated the powers that government would use. It was on us from the beginning. It has made the greatest country on earth, and it will remain so if we keep it. I'm Tom Del Begaro, and thanks for joining Politics in Perspective. See you next time.